Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing all right. How are you? How's
I'm
everybody
doing
doing?
well.
Good.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Give me about 2 seconds. I think my Wi-Fi is acting up. I'm really sorry about that. Let me see. But we're really heard a lot about the work you've done for Washington State, as well as from Zed when he went to the DNC meeting. So that was pretty inspiring to hear about.
Thank
But yeah. I think I saw your video with Soth. I actually know the founder. He's really
Oh,
cool.
really? Yeah. Just gotten involved with them, come on as an advisor, and I'm really impressed with already with what they put together and excited about the work that they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was talking to him the other day and he was like, yeah, and I don't think I got to hear too much about it, but I think he had an event with Rokana, so that was pretty cool for him, honestly. It's great you're working with that. It's awesome. Okay. For some reason it is not loading, so I will figure out some sort of solution really quick, but it won't take me longer than like 2 seconds. So, okay. All right. Okay. I got it fixed. All right, so we are so excited to have you. I would love for you to just possibly talk about how it's been, I mean, growing up South Asian in the United States, and then also what it's like being one of the few Asian party leaders, Democratic Party leaders in this space. Just take it away, I guess. Thank you so much. We're really happy to have you.
Yeah. Do we have time to do quick introductions?
Yes, actually, I should have done that the first time. Sorry. Hi, my name is Ankita. I'm a junior from Georgia. I'm the ANHPI Caucus chair. I'm really excited to have you, and I'd love to pass it off to Jonica, who's also really, really cool.
Hi, great to see you again, Chastity. I'm Jonica, for everyone that doesn't know me, and I'm the chair of the Washington High School Democrats for now, although there will be a new chair coming in about a month when I graduate.
So,
Ria, Celine, whoever's here, if you want to introduce yourself really quick.
Yeah, hey guys, my name is Ria. I'm the vice chair of the Women's Caucus, and I'm a junior in high school in Virginia. If Celine's here, then I'll pass it on to her, but if not, Ishan, you can go next.
Yeah, I'm Ishan. I'm a junior here in North Carolina, and I am the AANHPI Caucus's social media director.
nice.
Um, Jinya, Ty, if you guys want to take it, Rachithan, whichever works, honestly.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Sorry,
Oh,
Ty, go for it.
You're good.
He's on yours.
Yeah, I'll just say hi there. My name's Ty. I'm a sophomore in high school based in Nevada, and I am the ANHPI Caucus co-director for communication.
Um,
hi, my name is Junia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the vice chair of the AANHPI caucus. And I'll pass this off to Achuton because I don't think he's gone yet.
Hi, so my name's Achutan. I'm a sophomore from New Jersey, and I am the AANHPI Caucus's co-events director. And I'll pass it on to Anika.
Um, Annika?
Hi, I just joined. What are we doing?
Introductions.
Oh, hi, I'm Annika. I am the current partnerships director of the HSDA AA and HPI caucus. Um, I don't know who hasn't gone yet.
Yeah, I can go.
I
Hi,
think our
Shasti.
last person is Emma.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Um, Nice to see you again. I am coming in as the WASDA legislative chair in Washington State, with the turnovers. So yeah, super excited to be here.
Great.
Amazing. Okay, so Thank you so much, Emma, by the way. I think we have one more person, but I kind of already mentioned him. Go for it.
Hi, my name's Zayed. Pleasure seeing you again, Shasti. It was great seeing you down in Baltimore. Great seeing you on this call today. Hope this goes well.
Thank you.
All right. So, yes, I'm so sorry. I really should have done introductions first. That is my bad. I was a little bit nervous coming into this. Oh my God.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we love to start off with just like you possibly introducing yourself, your journey throughout politics, like what got you into it and what has kept you there, all that sort of things. Yeah, feel free to take it away.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for coming today, and it's great to meet everybody. And I love the diversity of geography that we have on this call. People from all over the country, which is really fantastic, and so happy to see you all be active and involved. And I was always kind of drawn to politics. I was a weird kid. I was like arguing with my teachers in preschool about who they were voting for, and so it's always been something that I have had an interest in, but it certainly, I think, kind of came really to the forefront in high school. I was a part of our youth advisory council and not a part of student government, but I was always kind of like somebody who was a bit on the like I liked the activism, and I liked the electoral politics part of it, but I was just really like interested in wanting to help my community where I could. And my first sort of campaign that I ever really worked on was a school bond levy campaign for my public high school. I grew up in Oregon, in a small town in Oregon, and I was actually adopted from India, born in Calcutta and adopted to the United States at 2 months old, to a single mom, and mostly raised by my mom and my grandmother in this like, super small, like 12,000 person town, where there was one other Indian girl in the town and everybody assumed we were sisters, because they couldn't figure out how there would be more than one of us. And so I have my experience of being, South Asian is, it's unique, although I think their adoption has, maybe a somewhat oversized sort of role in our community. There's a lot of us that have been adopted from India and from China and Vietnam and places like that to the United States. But certainly, I didn't grow up in a traditionally cultural South Asian family, although my adoptive mother was very much wanted me to feel proud of my heritage and feel connected to India, feel connected to the culture. And so, it certainly was encouraged that I learn everything that I could about, the home country and learn and have dolls that looked like me and things like that so that I would have some of that pride. And then I graduated from high school in this small town called Newburgh, and knew that I wanted to sort of work a bit in this space, but the Iraq War was raging, and so my classmates were getting sent off to war, and the George W. Bush was the president, and everything felt on fire. And so, much like I think probably what you all are kind of experiencing as well, right now. And so, I got a scholarship to go to Seattle University, a leadership scholarship. And that really was sort of like the deciding factor about, I wanted to be in a bigger city. I wanted to get out of my small town, and I, wanted to go to a school where I didn't feel like I was, one of a million, but that I had some more sort of direct encouragement from teachers and whatnot. And so I got the scholarship to Seattle University. And when I moved up to Seattle, the first thing that I did was I volunteered with the Washington State Democrats. And it was 2003, 2004. And so there was a big presidential election that was happening, and I wanted to get involved and I wanted to help. And I did the things that you all are doing, right? Which is I like learned how to knock doors and make phone calls, and I was helping on the comms team, and sort of helping with database work and helping with setting up interviews and doing things like that. And and then, we lost the presidency again, and it was devastating. And, I wasn't sure whether, I wanted to stay in this work or whether it kind of like broke my heart a little bit, and I didn't know um whether I could take it, like whether I could stick with it. And there was this elder Black woman who worked for the Washington State Democrats, who had fought in the civil rights movement, who had been a part of this work for decades. And she got the day after the election, she went back to the office and she told all of us, like, the work continues. We can't abandon this fight. We have to keep going. And that really motivated me to, sort of stay in it. And, I kind of rode the edge of activism and protesting and doing a lot of that type of work while also kind of working within the party and working on campaigns. During my senior year of college, this guy with a funny name, Barack Obama, decided to run for president. And I had read his book, Dreams from My Father. And it was the first time that I felt like somebody understood what life had been like for me to grow up in a white family, to grow up in a community where I was like, one of the only people of color. And to hear him talk about his experience of growing up in his family in Hawaii and sort of being this like cultural translator between these different communities, it was the first time I was like, wow, like I see myself in that. Like if somebody gets it. And I just vowed that like whatever this guy wanted to do, I wanted to help him. And so when he declared that he wanted to run for president, I was all in. And I became an Obama Fellow, where I learned how to tell my story. I learned how to connect with voters on the things that are important to them and how to, listen and at the doors and how to listen so that you are reflecting back, what people, what they're going through, and that you're making those real connections. And worked on the Obama campaign through that summer into the fall. And then we won, and I went off to the White House in the first class of Obama White House interns. And there were like 6,000 applicants, and 100 people got to be in that first class of Obama White House interns in the summer of 2009. And I was one of them. And I got to work in the Office of Urban Affairs, which was a brand new office that Obama had created. And I just had the time of my life. There was so much hope. There was so much good energy. It was so like we really, sort of felt like we had changed the world and that we could still make these big changes. And so I was supposed to go to graduate school that fall, and get a PhD in sociology. And I made the decision not to do that and instead deferred for a year and tried to get a job back in the White House. And it took about 4 or 5 months. But then a job became open and I applied for it, and I was hired into the Office of Public Engagement, where I worked for the president's special assistant on disability policy. He was a blind civil rights lawyer. And then eventually I was promoted to being Valerie Jarrett's executive assistant. And I had an office in the West Wing and sort of had this front row seat to history where I watched the Affordable Care Act get passed, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and like all of these really big landmark things were sort of happening, and I got to be witness to all of that, which was so exciting. And then I went and worked on the 2012 campaign in Chicago and did that run, and then decided it was time for a little bit of a break, so I went to graduate school and I went to Princeton and I got my master's in public affairs. And while I was there, I met a young woman named Malala and started working for Malala to build out her fund. Malala was 15 at the time, and I was employee number 5, and got to work closely with her family and with her. And it was really just an incredible experience, an incredible time. And so I sort of have moved a little bit in and out of international development work and domestic politics. My work is almost always sort of political in nature because I think standing up for your rights and being someone who doesn't traditionally, sort of fit into leadership means that everything we do is a little bit political. but I've also really loved getting to work on international issues and working for international figures. So I went to with Malala to the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony and was with her and her family and traveled with her for that. And that was where I met a guy named Kailash Satyarthi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize with Malala and is from India and was his issue was ending child labor. And so I later worked for Kailash for a little bit before ultimately returning back into politics in 2016. And so, I'll try to speed through this part, but basically, I sort of have been in and out of party politics ever since 2016. I ran for a state senate appointment and was following in the footsteps of Pramila Jayapal, another wonderful South Asian woman. And Pramila had won her congressional seat, which left her state senate seat open. And so I ran for that seat. I came in third out of 8 candidates, and then that's what brought me back into the party. So then I got involved in the local party and then eventually became our largest county in Washington State, King County Democrats chair, was there for 4 years, was the first woman of color to be in that role. And then after 4 years in that role, then I ran for state party chair and so was elected state party chair in 2023. Also the first woman of color in this for Washington State and the first South Asian woman to lead a state party for either party in the entire country. So, it is I never plotted, this was never the plan. I never sort of was like, okay, I sat down at, 20 years old and was like, okay, by the time I'm here, I want to be I want to be a party leader and I want to be doing these things. Life just kind of took its twists and turns. And I think the thing about me is that I've always been open to opportunity and I've always been willing to take the risk to try. And I've always done my best to sort of make myself indispensable to the people that I work with. I've first person in, last person out. No job is too small. You know, make other people's lives easier, do the best that you can. And be someone that people want to work with. And that much of my opportunities have come from people being like, we really love working with you now. We're going to go do something else. Would you like to come? And those job opportunities have opened up because of those types of relationships. I often tell people like, when people are like, sort of career advice, like, my early jobs, I went through normal processes of putting in my resume and applying for jobs. But in the last like 10, 15 years, it's all been through relationships. It's all been through doing this type of work and having people, open doors, sort of help me with these different opportunities. Or I've made my own way. I've stepped forth and I've run for these different offices and brought people with me in exchange for, sort of their support and their help. So I think it's really important that we all, sort of take control of our destiny. And I think sometimes as people in the AAPI community, our parents and our grandparents and our aunties and our uncles don't always understand what this whole political thing is. And sometimes they think that, it's like, well, just go be a doctor, just go be a lawyer, just go be, what is this whole thing? And I think it's really brave and it's really important that we, continue to operate in these spaces and find our way. And I see part of my job as being someone who has broken down these doors and tried to open them is that I got to make sure you all are coming in with me because it's hard to be the only one. It's hard to be the first. And I don't want to be, Kamala Harris said to me once, like, it's so great that you're the first, but don't let yourself be the last. And I think about that all the time, which is that I never want to be the last South Asian woman to do anything. I want to make sure that, everybody's coming in and building as well. So, I will stop there. So I'm now state party chair of Washington Dems, and then just a few months ago, I was appointed as the associate chair to the DNC, and I know some of you saw my race for vice chair, and it's very exciting to be in this moment, building this party that needs all of us to get back to winning and, making the difference for, not just our community, but absolutely our community, but also obviously for everybody across this country who, does not deserve to deal with the chaos and destruction that's coming from Trump. Um, so yeah, so long story short, that's me, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
First of all, the entire time you were talking, it sounded like I was like just shocked, like every single thing. I was like, you work with like I've heard of Kailash before. Like when I was little, my mom got me this book about Malala and Kailash, and I learned about him for the first time then. And you said his name, and I was like, you work with both. You actually met the people that I was reading in my children's. It was really crazy. That was really crazy to hear. But honestly, breaking that's historically making literally as you're living, which is kind of insane.
Yeah.
But yes, my first question for you is, as someone who has made history as the first South Asian woman, not the last, to chair a state political party in the United States, what does that moment mean for you personally? And how do you see it inspiring the next generation of female NHPI leaders?
Yeah, I mean it's an incredible feeling. It to me sometimes comes as like a double-edged sword because I couldn't believe that in 2023 that I would be the first, that it had taken so long for, these like to be able to do this. And it is an interesting thing as I, sort of operate and now get to know, many of the other party leaders across this country. There aren't a lot of us. There's a hand, I mean, it's growing, but there's definitely pretty small handful of sort of certainly South Asian leaders, but when you even expand into the full AAPI community, um, like for instance, out of like a nearly 500 DNC member base, about 30 of us. And so, it's definitely something that I think about a lot of just like how important it is that we are making sure that our community is represented and that we are seen as a valuable part of the conversation and valuable part of the coalition and that we're, doing the organizing work. So often when we have these discussions about, the Democratic base, our community gets left out. So it's really important to me, and by simply being who I am and my identity, it sort of forces the conversation in a way that if I'm not there, if I'm not at the table, we can be really overlooked. So that's really important to me. And then, I'm just so proud of, like seeing all of you, like that you would take, an hour out of your life to come and listen to me talk. And, I know certainly I know my Washington State friends, better, but all of you in your own communities are doing important work and you're doing things that really matter. And so getting to see that is like so incredible. And if I, can help by having, sort of learn some lessons and I can, I see a lot of my job as I'm just trying to take hurdles out of people's way. I'm trying to block and tackle and move obstacles out. And if I can do that and it makes it easier for you all to live your dreams and do the work that you want to do and be in these spaces and feel supported, then every hardship is worth it. And so I just am kind of eternally grateful for the opportunities and sometimes quite surprised that I'm the first and that I continue to be the first in a lot of these spaces. But, I'm glad that we're finally doing it. And if I can be a part of that, then, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much. It's as someone who's like, I've really always wanted to be involved in party politics, possibly run for office and all of those things. It's often dawned onto me that if I were to run for any state level office in Georgia, I would be the first if I were to win. And
Yep.
that still seems kind of crazy to say in the 21st century. But
Mhm.
in that light, I'll pass it off to Celine to ask the second question that we have for you.
Hello, I just want to first start off by saying your story is so inspirational, especially the work that you've been able to accomplish and do. And I know being the first is definitely probably not the easiest thing, but being a trailblazer in that space is truly so amazing and so inspirational. So the question I have is, having worked on national campaigns for leaders like Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders, how do those experiences prepare you for your role in state politics? And what lessons from national organizing do you bring into local strategy?
Thank you. That's a great question. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I kind of did things backwards. Like my first sort of big political job in many ways was the White House. And I think, the sort of traditional route would be that you would do sort of more work in your local community and like within the state, and then you would move to national. And just because of way my life went and the opportunities that came and the timing, it just so happened that I sort of went, kind of as big, as you could go. I mean, I was at the White House when I was like 23, 24 years old, and um I think what that did was it allowed me to be around excellence. Like even many people in that Obama campaign and Obama administration were like, they were the best, they were the best organizer in Iowa, or they were the best organizer in Georgia, or they were the expert on X, Y, and Z in this area, this policy or whatever it might be. And so, at a pretty young age, I was around people who I saw how they operated. I saw how they built. I saw how they would build coalitions and bring stakeholders in. And I saw what it was like to be able to sort of achieve at that level. And that has stayed with me always. I think I'm always looking for, how do I build an excellent team? How do I find those people who both have the skills but also the heart? Like, it's really important that people are passionate and they care about this, that um it's not just ticking a box, like it's not just like a resume builder, but that you're working with people who genuinely care about this work. And with the Democratic Party, I think we're particularly in a moment where we have to talk about it in terms of, being a part of this party is important because it helps people, it makes a difference in people's lives. And so that, like, I learned those lessons doing the national organizing work and the national and seeing the national players. And in fact, when I moved back home in 2016 and I ran for that state Senate race, one of the things that I told them was that I had developed a national sort of skill set. I had built and learned, and I had this national network of people that I knew, and I had been around people who had implemented incredible like urban policies and things like that. And what I wanted to do was to bring that back home. I wanted to bring that back into my home community. And, having those national experiences helped me to sort of, I don't know, bring a level of excellence into the local work and into the local party organizing. Because when I first got back from having been, in Obama land, and then I'm back home in my community here in Washington, and some of our party organizations, I mean, you all probably have gone to some of these meetings. I was like, who are these people? What are they doing? Like, they're arguing about some weird thing that nobody cares about. And I think part of the reason why I was able to come in and like quickly become county party chair and now state party chair was because I had seen excellent examples of functioning organizations. And therefore, I knew when it wasn't working back home where I needed to make those changes. And I had people in my network that I could rely upon to help me in sort of figuring out how to make those changes or what to do. So a lot of those skills are just so important. And then, working on a presidential campaign is like, it's fun. Like, it's really hard, but it's also a lot of fun. And people are so inspired by the candidate that everyone's working on that campaign. And, I think that energy and inspiration is also something that I'm consistently looking for in my work. That I really was, such an honor and a privilege to be able to learn that at such a young age, to be on that 2008 Obama campaign, which was kind of like a once in a lifetime type of campaign, until the Kamala campaign, which was also like so inspiring and incredible and history making as well. It just didn't, it's much better to win. And so, there are these opportunities that you get that you just you don't want to miss. You don't want to miss out on something. And that's what a lot of those national opportunities were for me.
Um, my next question is kind of just a big picture question about the direction of the Democratic Party. I often look to you as someone who has like outlined this clear message and like this clear vision for our party when like it's clear that we need to craft more than just like we're the antithesis to Trump, like we need our own ethos. So what steps need to be taken by the Democratic Party to reach voters we have lost touch with, and how are Democrats actively right now working to recalibrate their strategies so we can win majorities in 2026?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, this whole country, right, for the last decade has just been like run the gambit with having to be responsive and reactive to Trump. And I think that what we have learned as a Democratic Party is that, Trump is a symptom of a culture that is, which is so counter to a lot of the values of like AAPI families, but it's about individualism and greed and, sort of this like disconnect of larger community support and things like that. And Trump, if we make everything about Trump, then when Trump is no longer in the picture, we will not know what to do with the person who fills that void. Like it's like a bathtub filling back up. You can drain it, but if you don't deal with the root causes, it's gonna fill right back up, and then what? So, my sort of creed is that like as Democrats, we have to be able to communicate what it is that makes us different and what is it that like us being in power, what does that mean for everyday people, for working class people, and I read this research that has stuck with me. I read it, I think maybe in like December, and the research basically said that the American people generally know that Republicans are corrupt, that they're bullies, that they're, unethical, but they believe that Democrats don't do anything when they have power. And so that has been for me this guiding light of like we have to demonstrate that people's lives do improve and will get better if we are in power. And I say everyone deserves democratic representation. Even in the rural parts in my state, they have Republican state legislators or Republicans on the port, and they're not showing up in community. They were refusing federal dollars because it came from Biden that would have brought more jobs into their communities. And so we have to remind people, but we have to show them too of what that looks like. And at a very, very basic level, I believe in my lifetime, there has only been one party that genuinely cares about all people. And that is the Democratic Party. And you can be mad at the Democratic Party, you can criticize the Democratic Party, all of those things are true. But you have to recognize that we're not out here trying to bankrupt you and, literally take, food out of your mouth to make sure that, billionaires are the ones who are, making another $1 billion, right? Like that is a difference, and we have to be proud to own that. And we have to be willing to talk about it in those terms. And that, we actually want your life to get better. We want you to put food on the table for your family. We want you to be able to take care of your aging parents. We want you to be able to have a good life where you can work a job that you enjoy and then also have time and money to be able to enjoy life, go on vacation, do things like that. That's what we want. And we're going to stand up for everybody to do that, and no matter whether, what other gender you are, race you are, economic class you are, we're going to fight for you. We're going to stand up for you. So that's the message that we have to be just like drilling over and over so that people really get that. And the way we do that is also by amplifying and uplifting people's real stories. It's one thing for me as a state party leader or DNC officer to say, these things that I just said too. It's another thing to say, hey, we have this person right here in our community who is, kids are in the Head Start program and, now their kids have lost preschool and, hey, we've got a veteran who fought in, uh whatever war and they served this country and they and now we're cutting their health insurance. Like we've got to be amplifying those real people stories. And I think as a Democratic Party we have to be willing to be honest with people about where we come up short and where we need to improve and build something that people actually want to be a part of, because I think the mistake that we made in the last election is we got so caught in trying to silo everybody where it was like, black people for Kamala and AAPI for Kamala and, blah, blah, blah. But we made everybody feel like they were not important by doing that. By like overly trying to make these different groups feel is that we actually ended up dividing everybody. And instead, we've got to focus on how we build for everyone and then allow people to organize the way they want to organize. So like if people want to organize as an AAPI community, that's fantastic. But when we're talking to people, we are saying, here's how we're building for the AAPI community, but also it will benefit everybody because everybody will be able to be better served by better economic policies, by, better healthcare, better education, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when I saw the ANHPI for Harris and all of those things, it was very like heartwarming because it was like, oh, you actually recognize us like that we actually exist. And it was very cool to
Yes.
see all of the different groups. But I also felt like it was just slightly inaccessible. Like even now, it's a bit hard for me to be like, oh, wait, so who can I contact at Chinese Americans for Harris? Who can I contact at Filipino Americans for Harris? Like obviously I know of them, I know of their names, but it's just like for the average person, who would they contact? Who would they talk to? Especially given that a lot of the chairs were Congress people, and they have busy lives, busy schedules. So I definitely feel like the organizing there was obviously rushed. We only had 100 days, right?
Yeah.
But we also definitely should take some lessons that yes, ethnic organizing is really cool and it's amazing to see like people like who look like us step into leadership, but we also can't have like not have a diversity of people on a committee because for example, I think Korean Americans for Harris and South Asian Americans for Harris were one of the most successful because they had a mixture of elected representatives and organizers on their board.
Yep. Very much so. And like I think it's still great, but I also never want us to just be tokenized. When I came in, when Ken asked me to, that I would be an associate chair and we were talking about sort of portfolio, obviously I'm the only AAPI officer of the DNC. So like that is largely my community. I am doing a lot of that work, but that's not the only thing that I bring. I'm also a state party chair. I also have this type of organizing experience. I've worked with surrogates and sort of in arts and culture spaces. And, like, so there's a lot of things that I bring, and it was important to me that I was seen for those pieces too, and not just sort of, okay, you're Asian, just do the Asian stuff, and so I do think that is important um for all of us that we, that like we bring a lot to the table and that we should never be just distilled into one thing.
Absolutely. I've had that talk before with my friends. They were like, oh, well, as ANHPI caucus chair, you're kind of going to be pigeonholed if you only do that stuff. But I also feel like there aren't very many people who are willing to be pigeonholed. And I feel like
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And I'm like, it's okay if I do that for a little bit. I'm gonna branch out as soon as anyways when I want to, and I'm only like 17, so I have time.
Yeah.
Right? So if
Yes.
there's any time to get pigeonholed for ethnic organizing, it's now,
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I would love to have Jinya ask a question and then Emma right after her. Jinya, if you want to ask that one really quick.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, as someone who went to college in Washington State and had so many formative experiences there, how did your experiences in that region shape your approach to community organizing and political leadership as a whole?
Yeah, so I mean, Washington and particularly Seattle, right? Like we sort of have a reputation for our activism, and have had sort of these major like worldwide protests have happened and originated, in Washington State in the Seattle region. And so it is sort of a bit of a part of the culture, I mean, it is something that I felt like as a, college activist, I mean, there were protests happening like every weekend and kind of like now, right? It's like the hands-off protests were April 5th and they were this past Saturday and there will be another one. And, there's just sort of this energy. And so in many ways, I feel like, um, it was kind of like it was hard to avoid it. It was kind of like, well, that's what everybody's going to do, and my friends are doing it, and I wanted to be a part of that as well. And I do think that there is like there's sort of the like wild, wild west mentality and the like, um, if you trace back to the roots, like many of the people that like settled out here in the West were people who were ambitious and they were driven and they wanted, to sort of strike it out and find, sort of make their own futures by going on like the Oregon Trail and doing things like that. And so I do think there is that kind of like culture of progressivism and forward thinking and innovation that is very much a part of the sort of Pacific Northwest and in Washington State. And so that certainly has had a major influence on, my organizing and my where my passions have grown. We have a big labor community out here, so like a lot of protests are related to, workers' rights. And so that's been very important to me. A lot of diversity. And so there's been the May Day rallies and, immigrant rights rallies and things like that that I certainly, have participated in, throughout my career, but particularly when I was like in college and whatnot. Um, and I'm just proud, I'm proud to be here. I'm proud like as I look out my window, it's like so beautiful to live in the Northwest. It's so we get a bad rep for all of the rain that we have, but my mom would always say like without that rain, we wouldn't have the tree, green trees and the flowers and the, like um and so I do think there's also that sort of commitment to the environment and a understanding and recognition of, climate change and of needing to really like be caretakers of our earth. And a lot of that also comes from being connected to the tribes and to indigenous people too. That we have, Washington has 29 federally recognized tribes. We're one of the states with the most tribes. And so I just think there's a lot of that that's just like in the ethos, like just sort of like it's hard to miss when you're growing up in a place like out here and you're sort of doing your early organizing in a place like this. So I am a constantly proud Westerner and a proud Washingtonian and a Pacific Northwesterner. And, I just, I'm constantly sort of a thorn in the side of like the DNC because I'm always like, hey, there's a whole other country over here. It doesn't just stop at Chicago. Like, keep on coming. It's because I'm really proud of what we have and what we built. And I think that we should be viewed as leaders in these spaces and leaders on policy. So much of like there's a lot that we've built here in Washington that I wish everybody had. Like I wish it was federal policy to have the kind of like paid family medical leave that we have and overtime policies and healthcare and things like that that I think everybody deserves. And we part of the reason why we keep winning in Washington is because we keep passing things like that that make it so that people want to live in our state.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight on that.
Absolutely.
Hi, Shasti. I think my question, I was down in Olympia at the Washington State Capitol a little while ago. And I actually heard, so in Washington State, our minority is the Republicans. And I heard somebody talking about really near kind of cutoff week in the end of session that about how the Republicans have a strength in being a minority because they have less to lose. In some ways, with kind of holding back passing things and going into special session. Anyway, but it kind of got me thinking that we as Democrats at the national level, how do you think we sort of hold that benefit being in the minority, especially as somebody who's kind of, crazily enough, been a first in the 21st century?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I do think, I think back there's that line in Hamilton where it's like, what is it? It's like campaigning is easy, but governing is hard. Um, it is easy, and the Republicans have done this for years, right? Where it's like it's easy to be the party of no if like you don't have to be responsible for anything. Like if you don't have to actually make sure that the trains run on time, that things are getting done and deliver. It's very easy to just sort of be, sort of obstructionist. And I do think that in this moment nationally, some of the best that we can do is be obstructionist. We don't have any of the chambers. What we can do is we can gum it up and slow it down and sort of fight back where we can. And the courts are also a big part of it. The law, like it's always a little bit slow, but the lawsuits have been coming in to help us out. And good journalism is always incredibly important. But I do think that that is sort of what mode we are in, is that we have to show, and it's already making a difference. I mean, the way that Trump sort of flip-flopped on tariffs, I do think was in part because of the fact that, the hands-off protests were happening and people, they had to see that there was this outpouring of people being like, not on my dime, not on my time. And we need to continue to do both, and we also need to continue to win elections. The other big tell for me is that we had been winning, I want to say it was like 90% of the special elections that have happened since Trump took office. So in places like in Iowa, there was a state Senate race where it was a Trump plus 21 district. We won that. There was a seat in New York that had been also deep red. We won that. We won the two races in Pennsylvania. We won the Iowa Supreme Court. And that freaked them out enough that they pulled back Elise Stefanik's nomination to run for UN ambassador, to be UN ambassador. And so we have to continue to show them that we're not going to make this easy for them, and what I mean, you all probably in school have studied it more recently than me, but like the tenets of authoritarianism and fascism is that you basically depress and exhaust the masses to the point that they just give up, that they just sort of say, we can't do anything, and it makes it easier for people to sort of be more pliable. And so all of this like fighting back and through demonstrations, through organizing in elections and winning elections, all of that is a way to push back and fight and show them that we're not going to go quietly and that they're not going to be able to just sort of do whatever they want. And we're going to hold them accountable. So I do think that that is sort of the role that we are in, and it's something that in Washington State, the Republicans, because they've been in the minority for so long, like, I mean, they basically get to just make noise, and sometimes that means it moderates us, it's like the sort of more further left progressive folks are constantly frustrated because the people in the middle want to make a deal, and they love, we as Democrats love bipartisanship. Republicans don't care. They for decades have not cared about but we always like this idea of being able to get, a few Republican votes to show that we're not doing this out of party, this is us doing what's best, and look, we were able to get a Republican to sign on to it. And I guess like maybe the public likes that. But that's all they really can do. And I think for us, my hope is that we can get a couple of these Republicans to caucus with us, and maybe that also slows some things down too.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you again for sharing your voice with us. I think I have maybe one more question, or if there's like a lot of questions from the audience, we can totally open that up too. I don't want to take up too much time with me just talking, me asking questions, But I do have one last one. So in this political climate where civil rights protection, immigrant rights, reproductive rights, and voting access are currently being challenged nationwide and statewide, how do you see state level, just leaders in general, playing a role in defending democracy and advancing progressive values, especially in local areas, such as like in specific states?
Yeah, it's a little bit to what Emma's question was too, right? Which is where do we have power and where can we win and where can we put in those protections and whatnot? Bye, Jonica. And so like that work has to happen at the state level. While we don't have majorities at the federal level, the places where we are able to do our best work are, in states where there is a Democratic governor, Democratic state legislature, where there are some sort of stops that we can put in place. And, so often, sort of states are these like laboratories of democracy. We can test different policies, we can test different messaging, different organizing tools. There's two big governors races this year, for instance, in Virginia and New Jersey. These will be great places for us to do pilot projects and to test different things that will help us be prepared to, try different things for the midterms next year, when really that's kind of the whole ball game. And, like in my state in Washington, right, like we've sort of did our best to kind of codify abortion into the state constitution. Just yesterday, the state legislature and the governor signed a bill saying that the federal government and other states cannot send National Guard troops into our state without the governor's permission. And, that's like in case we get martial law, and something really crazy happens where like militia starts coming in, we now have those protections in place. And, that's why like I'm always saying I'd much rather be in this Washington than that other Washington, because we have those protections in place. And I really feel for my peers that are in these like deep red states where they are getting completely decimated by what's coming out of the Trump administration, but they also don't have any backup with their state legislatures, with their, Congress people, with their legislators, with their governor. There's just, it's like Idaho, which is just right next to us. It's just in such worse shape than we are because they don't have majorities. They don't even have a super minority, so they can't stop when, their state legislatures are putting through these bills where they're banning trans athletes, or they're saying that there's only two genders, or they are, defunding all kinds of, social services. There's no stopgap. So, I think we have to do everything we can to build in these protections where we can, and then use those as models that when we are hopefully have the House back next year, we'll be able to put in some more of those protections at a federal level to help everyone.
Absolutely. Being in Georgia, I got to go to the legislative session a couple of times. Interestingly enough, we adjourned really, really early into the last day of session. So a lot of the really, really horrible bills, including like an anti-DEI bill, actually didn't get passed. But they did make it legal, I believe, to discriminate on you on the basis of your sexuality. So they can now refuse services to you if you're if you identify a certain way, which is just great, honestly.
Yeah. Awful.
But yeah, before I do release to general questions, I would love to ask, specifically, you were talking about local and state level races that you knew of or you were connected to. Is there a good email or a phone number or whatever that would be really good for me to forward to my members in those states who want to get involved with those races but don't really know anyone like on the campaign?
Yeah, I'm happy. I can put it in the chat. I'm happy if you wanna just reach out to me.
Mhm.
Um, feel free to share that around, and then I'm happy to try to like help people get connected into the right places. I'm a state party evangelist, so I'm always going to tell people that to get involved in their local parties and you know get connected because they're the ones who are going to know and know who the local candidates are, know the races, and it's always a great place to get started is through your local party, whether it's the county party or the state party. But starting local, I think, is really a great place to start.
Absolutely. Ishan, I think I saw you had a question.
Yeah, I did. So number one, thank you for coming out here and speaking to us. I live in North Carolina, and we have a very GOP dominated House, especially recently. They've done very detrimental things to North Carolinian society, cut various DEI measures. Um, the representative from my county was the one that pioneered that. And so, what would you say to me as youth and other youth, especially in red states? What can we do to reach out to our congressmen and really participate in democracy when they don't reply or listen?
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, you do have a great state Democratic Party chair in North Carolina, and love Anderson very much, and think she's doing a great job. And I know you all are. Um, there's so many battles. And I know like the Supreme Court race, I cannot believe it is basically a model for what I think they may try to do next year, which is like to just say, nope, we are not going to vacate. We're going to claim that, we won even though we didn't. I think it's important to like in this moment, it's important to like sort of show up and hold these people accountable. Go to offices, make phone calls. Um, I actually thought it was really clever a couple weeks ago that there was those like missing posters for the Congress people who weren't holding town halls and things like that. So thinking about creative ideas to, this work has to be fun. Like, like it doesn't always have to be hard and painful. Like the world is hard and painful, but we can make this work more creative. We can make it more fun. We can make it like we can some of the humor is often one of the best ways to be sort of revolutionary in some way. So finding those ways to like I mean these guys don't like to be made fun of. They don't like the joke. They want to be taken seriously. They don't want to be challenged. And I think doing everything you can to continue to hold a spotlight on them. And I say like make them own this. Even our state, like legislators, I'm like you got to answer for Trump. This is your party. You have made the Republican Party the party of Trump. So what is your answer to the people that are in your district who are losing their, Medicare and they're, getting their funding cut, they're losing their jobs? What is your answer to them? And, I think as much as you can sort of call them out, and if they have events, protest at them. And if they don't, just I would like write letters to the editor, be on social media, call them out. And I think especially as young people, they sort of don't know what to do because they like on both sides of the aisle, there's a recognition of the need to have young people a part of their work. And so I think they don't know what to do when you have like really, talented young people that are getting involved and they kind of count on young people not being involved. And so when you're showing up, it definitely rattles their cages a little bit. And I think that, it's always better to do it with friends and to do it with, like other peers and whatnot. But this is an opportunity. And I think reminding people, it's like, well, what have they done for you lately? How has your life improved while state rep Republican so and so has been in office, or Congressperson Republican has been in office? How, and asking people to really have you ever met them? Have you met this person? Have they ever knocked on your door? And then we as Democrats have to be showing up so that we are countering that narrative of them not being in community. We did a people's town. I have in Washington, we have two Republican Congress people, and we did a people's town hall 2 weeks ago that was really successful. And then we're doing another one on Friday in the other district. And we're just it's like, hey, we're here. Like they're not showing up and doing town halls. We're here. We're not afraid to answer questions. We're not afraid to be in community. You can disagree with us. We believe in democracy. Um, but I think it's really important to just show up and not check out. I think that's my ultimate sort of advice to you is just find ways to be involved and to not leave it to somebody else because that's how we got into this mess is everybody thought somebody else would take care of it.
Yeah, definitely. Those are definitely some powerful words. Very inspiring. And I'll be sure to especially relay that to my county members. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good.
If there isn't like any other questions as of right now, I would just really like to quickly. Oh, okay, Zed, go for it.
I just had one question, sort of going back to your experiences. Like you said earlier, there's only like 30 members of the DNC who are a member of the Asian community, and I'm just curious, like what sort of obstacles have you faced as an Asian American in the Democratic Party, and like what would you suggest advice-wise on like dealing with that experience of being a minority within this party?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm like, how honest do I want to be? Um, Having just gone through the DNC vice chair race, it was very illuminating. And sometimes I forget because what I've built out here in Washington, I sometimes forget that in other parts of the country and other parts of the party, they're not as welcoming, they're not as open. Um, you know, just being totally honest and blunt with you as all, I feel like the Black community has really organized, like they've come together. Now there's, all kinds of differences of opinions and different people, and people want different resources and all of those things. But at the end of the day, with the Black community and the Latino community, know that it's important to have their people at the table. Like they know that it's important that they are seen as an important voting bloc and that their community is invested in and that they are seen as communities that we as a Democratic Party cannot lose. And so they hang together. They support their candidates. They raise money together. They do like they sort of come, even if there's disagreements within those communities, when they are outwardly facing, they're definitely really pushing to make sure that they are seen. In our community, I think, I mean, we are not a monolith. I mean, none of these communities are. We are not all the same. But I think that a lot of our different cultures view political activity as something that we shouldn't be a part of or that it's not important and that we shouldn't rock the boat. That it's more that we should be under the radar, we should, not push for certain things. And so one of the things that was really hard through that vice chair race is that there was a lot of lip service about the importance of having somebody from our community, but our own community didn't all support me. And, they didn't sort of make a choice of we need to make sure that we have a strong AAPI leader as an officer. And so that was very disappointing to see. And then as I was campaigning and talking to other DNC members about the importance of our community, they didn't get like many of them were just like, no. They were like, like, and but like they did see the value of having like a Black woman in leadership and then they saw a young person in leadership or a person from this community. And so sometimes it's really hard because I feel like I'm doing everything I can to be as excellent as I can as an individual, but also in part because I'm one of the first, I'm also having to carry the whole community and I'm having to teach our community how to engage and how to get power and use power at the same time. Whereas some of the other communities have figured out a long time ago that like if they hang together, even if they all hate each other, but if they hang together, they will have more power. So they are willing to do that in a way that I think our community is just starting to figure out. And that is something that I would really hope we can change as more of us run for these roles. And it's not just like crabs in a barrel where we're competing against each other, but we're seeing that if there's more of us in these types of roles, we will be able to get more done for all of us together. And it won't just be, one Shasti and one Ankita and one, like there's all of us here that can make a difference. Um, and sometimes it's really painful to have to like constantly remind people that our community matters, you know? Um, I think we get taken for granted a lot, and that is a really painful thing, and I sometimes feel like I have to be the constant sort of thorn in people's sides to be like, hey, don't forget, we're here too. And, we're the fastest growing demographic in this country. We are not a guaranteed voting for Democrats. There's generational divides here, but the Republicans are making a play and they are funding AAPI candidates because they understand our community and they understand that there's value there in a way that we as Democrats are taking for granted. And, I'm sort of constantly ringing that bell and trying to push that people see that both in our community and outside of it.
Thank you. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, thank you, Shasti, for such an amazing event. Before you do have to go, we'd love to take like a quick Zoom photo. We always do this. So if everyone is comfortable with turning on their cameras, we would love to have like a quick Zoom photo. That'd be really cute. Okay. Ishan is just like, never mind. Monica, Celine, if you can, it's okay if you can't. All right. 1, 2, smile. One more time. Okay, thank you again so much. It was a pleasure. I will be reaching out to your email for sure. And I would welcome specifically Achitan. I know you're in New Jersey, so you definitely want to get involved with that governor's run. Feel free to reach out there as well. And then obviously, I think the Georgia governor's run is going to be crazy, and the Georgia Senate run's going to be crazy. So I'm excited for this summer for sure. But again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you. And I'm pretty sure Jonica would also love to say so as well, and so would Ria, but they both had to leave early. Celine, if you want to say something, but at that point, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was great to meet you all. Feel free to email me, and I'm happy to get you connected and keep me updated on your journeys and where you all, get involved and whatnot. And yeah, just a real pleasure. So thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye.